I was asked to present a little bit about genetics in a scientific approach, and a lot of that will add to what Dr. Yapi have also presented this morning. Before I start, I think I want to ask you a few questions, and all that you need to do is just think, how do you do it in your own study? How do you select the next generation of breeding animals? How do you do it on your farm? What characteristics are important for you to use and to select for in your herd? Do you have a clear long-term breeding objective? Do you know where you want to go in the long term? If you don't have that, then you should spend some time thinking about it and put it on paper and work towards it. And this is nothing just to do with breeding values. It could be the visual side of the animal and so forth. And then, do you have a selection criteria, one criteria for all of your animals, or do you have different criteria for your cows and your bulls? Is that selection criteria the same or different? And then the last question I want just for you to keep in your back of your head is, do you use breeding values as an additional tool when you select animals on your farm at a sale? Do you use that values or not? And so I think one always learns from history. If you go to the dairy cattle with selection and the use of breeding values and so forth, and now with genomics, we can learn a lot from that sector. And what that shows us is that selection on a single trait is dangerous. If you do selection on a single trait and you don't keep the others in mind, you can select for the one, but for the other ones you will lose gain in those traits. En dan wat baie keer gebeur, as jy byvoorbeeld selekteer vir, kom ons sê, kleiner geboortegewigte, dan sien jy, maar my speengewigte raak ook nou laer, en dan ewe skielik dan vergeet jy nou van die geboortegewig, en selekteer jy nou weer bietjie vir groter speenkalvers, en wat gebeur met jou geboortegewig? The birth weight is going up. So you will just play around the whole time, and you won't progress as that you thought you would do. As I said, you must have a clearly defined long-term breeding objective, and Dr. Yapi have also touched on that. A breeding objective, what is that, and what do you put into a breeding objective? When you define your breeding objective, the traits that you need to include must be, firstly, it must be clearly defined. Secondly, it must be of economical importance. It doesn't help you select for traits that is not linked to your economical situation and markets on the farm. Then the third one, it must be measurable. If you can't measure it, you cannot select for it. It must be measurable. And then it must be heritable, and it must have genetic variants. So Dr. Yapi said I can use this. Instead, he didn't use it, so I'm going to try to explain this. A lot of farmers, when they talk about heritability, then they ask, what is the heritability of reproductive traits like age at first calf and intercalving period? So, do you know what is the heritability of reproduction traits? It is 10% and less than 10%. That means on the most 10% of that reproduction is because of the genetics. The other 90% is due to the environmental effects that play a role into reproduction. Now, is it worthwhile for you? Can you select for that then? If it's only 10%, is it worthwhile selecting genetically for reproductive traits that is lowly heritable? Or is it too low? The question that I ask is, what's the heritability for 10 fingers on your hand? What's the heritability of the number of fingers on our hands? 100%. 100%. Can you select for that? Why can't you select for it? It's 100% heritable. You cannot, because there's no variation. There's no variation that one can select. Just a observation. I look at a documentary program last week about genetic disorders, and there's one woman. She was born with 12 toes, and she have carried that mutation over to her son, and he was born with 12 fingers. So it's just so there is also mutations, but you cannot select out of the population for that. Why can we select for fertility traits, even if it is lowly heritable? Because there's a lot of variation. And as long as there is variation and there's a small part that is heritable, then you can select very efficiently on those traits. Okay, so the breeding objective, I have talked now about what is included in there, and then what is very important, this breeding objective must always fit into your markets as well as on the production environment systems in which you produce the products that you produce. And then in extensive farming systems, change your genetics to fit your environment. Never ever try to change the environment to fit your animals. That is not sustainable. You must select your animals to fit your environment. That is to maximum your profitability. So beef cattle, if we look at beef cattle breeding, what do we need in beef cattle breeding? We need a genetically efficient cow herd. If you don't have a very efficient cow herd, then you have troubles. And then you need cattle that can produce heavier weaners, because that's what the market asks, and then produce calves that can grow also efficient after wean. Why is that important? Because in South Africa, still the biggest majority of meat that we buy is coming through feedlots. And if your herd is not adapted to be feed in feedlots, then there is also some challenges sometimes. But of course, it depends on your production systems and your environment in which that animals must produce in. You cannot have big, heavy animals on a farm that is a not so good environment for beef production. So if you are in the Karoo, for instance, it is silly to keep animals there that have a high requirements to be fitted. There you need an animal that's more adapted to that environment and that need less resources to maintain itself and to reproduce. So what we do is within Stadboek, we have identified, or we try to pin down what is a efficient cow. So an efficient cow, according to us and the data that you record and send to the logic system, is a cow that calves easily. That's important. You need a cow. You need a cow that gives birth to a calf that's not too heavy at birth, but also not too small. Because if it's too small, then that calf is not viable to live on or to produce as required. Then we want cows that can breed calves that wean relatively heavy with a very good mother ability of the cow. And then we look for the animals that have a relatively lower maintenance for the system or the farm or production system in which they produce. And then, very important, we need a calf every year. So that cow must calf every year. So how can we put this together in a selection tool? So we want to select the efficient cow by selecting them on more than one trait. Remember that I say you cannot select only for a single trait. You must select for multiple traits at the same time, so that you can be sure that you go forward. And then the optimal selection then you must select the optimum for the environment in which you farm. And then within that, you must look at your calving ease, your cow fertility. You must see that the cow has enough milk. Not lots of milk, enough milk. Because if that cow has too much milk, she uses a lot of resources to produce milk instead of growth. And she will transmit that genes to her offspring, and the offspring will grow directly a little bit slower. And then, of course, a cow that don't have that much of a maintenance. So at Startbook we have created, we call it a selection index. That is one value that consists out of a lot of traits. And then, so what we do is we look for calving ease, for calf growth, for milk, maintenance, fertility, and what we use is we use the breeding values for birth weight to define calving ease. I know birth weight is not the only contributor to calving difficulties, but if you go to the literature and you read, it still stays the main contributor. So although there's other contributors also that make a calf big or small at birth, the birth weight of the calf is still one of the biggest contributors. Then for calf growth, we look at the weaning weight of the calf. For the milk value, we look at the weaning maternal breeding value. We call it milk, but it is actually more than just milk, because you look for a cow that can raise her calf very successfully. You can have a cow with a lot of milk, but if she do not give the calf enough time to suckle, then she doesn't have good mother abilities, and then her milk value will be lower. So I get a lot of time that farmers phoning me and say, this milk breeding value is not right, because I must come to the farm and he will show me his cows. When they walk in the field, the milk is spuit net uit die spene uit. But that cow does not raise her calf as good as she should have. And then we look at maintenance value. Now, maintenance value is based on the cow weight breeding values, but we use the metabolical weight of the animal, and that's always the cow weight at weaning of the calf to the power of 0.75. And then also we include 10% of the milk breeding value. Why do we do that in maintenance? Because it requires energy for milk production that goes into the maintenance that cannot be used in growth. So that is very important. So basically we penalized on the top, we give advantage to cows with good maternal or milk value, but then at the same time we penalized those ones that have too many milk, so that it can balance out a little bit on that side. And then of course fertility is very important. It's one of the most important building blocks of the cow value, and there we incorporate the breeding values for heifer fertility, cow fertility, and for longevity in the herds. Why do we use breeding values of EBVs? Maybe one must talk about the genetic merit of animals instead of breeding values. So why do we use breeding values? We use it because performance are always based on the genetics that the animal carry and the environment in which the animal have grown or produced in. Breeding values reflect always on the genetic ability for the animal. So what we try to do is with BLUP, Best Linear Unbiased Prediction Methodology, we try to remove the genetic effect from the environmental effects, so that you can know what is the breeding potential for this animal. What is the part of genes that this animal will transmit to his or her offspring, independent of the environment, therefore. And then I also said it already, always select animals suited for your environment in which you are breeding. And it doesn't matter, there's a lot of opinions, but breeding values do make a difference as a selection tool in selection programs. I can ask the same as Dr. Yapi earlier have also asked. There's a bull. Is that a good bull? Will you use it in your stud, or do you think it's not so good? There's the animal, it stands, say for instance, it stands today here in front of us. You can see all the phenotypics of the visuals. I don't want to use visuals, phenotypic. So, is it possible to make a decision just for the animal standing in front of you without any other additional information? It is not. Why is it like that? Because the phenotype that you see or measure or on the farm is always a product of the environment in which the animal was performed or kept, plus the genetic makeup of the animal. And that's very important, because the environmental effect is not heritable. That animal cannot transmit this to his or her next generations. Only the genetic part can be transmitted to the next generation. And this you cannot, if you buy a bull on a sale, the environment you cannot take home. Yeah, you take the animal back home that's in a very good condition. If you put it on your farm and your farm is not so great environment than where the animal is coming from, it will lose condition. And but the breeding values, that is the part that you buy and that you take home, and this is the investment in your herd from a breeding point of view. Something like weaning weight, the heritability is 24%, and that means that the environment on the weaning weight of the calf play a 76% part, but this is not, you cannot select on this, you can only select on that part, and you can do it very successfully. I already used this example where it is only 10% heritable. There's a lot of variation, and it is, you can make genetic progress by selecting on these lower heritable traits. So breeding value estimations are always work in terms of a so-called contemporary group. What is a contemporary group? A contemporary group is a group of animals, roughly the same age, that were kept under the same conditions and have received exactly the same treatment. So if I have a lot of calves and they were treated exactly the same, and there's still differences in terms of, so if, now where I'm now, sorry. So when you have a group of calves and they are roughly the same age, the same sex, you have treated them the same, you have given them the same opportunity to growth, but there is still variation, then the one that's the heaviest have the better genes for growth than the one that's the lightest. The lightest calf will then have the genes with the lowest genetic merit. Just to explain it a little bit better, I take a physics test at once, and I was writing this physics test alongside these two gentlemen. I think you all know that. I don't have to tell you. And when the results come back, this was my index. Who is still using, or you all do, because it's part of breed standards, the wean indices. When you wean your group of weaners, then you get a wean index, and we all still use it today to select within that group name. So I think the battery is starting, so I will just talk harder. So when the scores come out, they also calculated an index based on that points that come out. And when the results come out, these two other gentlemen were the same. They were both scoring 107 index points, but I was only scoring 86. And I know I'm not the cleverest of all, but I'm not so bad. So I went back and I asked them, I want to redo the test. And they say, yes, it's fine. They just mix the questions and stuff like that. And the next time, a week later, I went back for the same test. So when I come there, there was 2 other guys that's going to write that with me. When that indices come back, I was 118. So that is nice. I like that. That chap was 107 and this one was 84. So does it mean that in a week's time, my knowledge have improved that much? No. What happened is that I was still the same person, but I have written the test alongside other people and not the same people. So you will see this guy, he have get 107 index points. So does this other 2 gentlemen. Do you think they are on the same level? Because they have all the same indices. Okay? So, it cannot, this guy, this 107 is not the same as the 107 on these 2. Why is this 2 the same? Because they were in the same contemporary group. That guy was in another contemporary group. So, in phenotypical indices has still a big role to play, but you can only use it to select within that contemporary group in which that index was calculated on. You can't even compare the index from one group of calves to a next, even they have been born in the same year, but you have treated them differently. So that's the only thing from an index. You can use it for selection, very efficiency, within that group where that index was calculated on. But you cannot compare that with an index of other animals that was calculated in another contemporary group. So, but what is very important is between these two guys at the bottom, there was one significant thing that happened. I have written a test with this guy and with that guy. So what did I do? I form a I connect these 2 together because my genes are still the same, but I've performed better compared to this guy, but I was very bad compared to this guy. So what happened is, you will see that in the first test, this one have received 107 index points. I've got 86, so there's a difference of 21 index points between me and this guy on this side. In the other group, I was 11 index points better than this guy. So, in fact, there is a 32 index points difference between these 2 that have received exactly the same group indices. So, if we go back to your cattle farming and stud farming, who connects all of these things together? Your bulls. You use your bulls over years, over seasons. You sell bulls to other breeders. That bull have offspring in other herds and different environments. The same with your cows. If you sell cows, they are being measured and tested in different environments, in different farms and so forth. And that is how we build up the connectiveness between genetics flow throughout the entire breed. So if we have to look at breeding values then, remember I've told you I was just 11 points better than this guy, 21 points worse than these two guys, and so forth. And if you use that, you take those and you bring in the heritability of the trait, and then on the end of the day, you get breeding values. So if we have to rank all of us in terms of breeding values, these two guys on top with a heritability of 24% will have a 0.5 breeding value. I would have an average of 0. This one a minus 2.6, and this guy minus 8.1. That is how we calculate, or the program basically use it to calculate breeding values. But it's not so straightforward, because the model is very complex and there's a lot of information going in. This is just to make it more understandable. So the principle of BLUP is all animals must be measured within groups, because the definition of the groups or contemporary groups is so that we can effectively remove the environmental effect from the genetics. A bull, Dr. Yapi have said that this morning also, a bull that constantly breed above average weaners, irrespectively of the herd or system, will have a higher breeding value. And all our pedigrees and animals are creating the links between all of these groups and farms. Then I just want to explain also something to you. I use this jelly baby breeding because it's easy for me to understand.
It's the only way I understand. There was a new light going up for Scott when he saw this.
So when I start with my jelly baby breeding, I have a red baby and a white baby. So when I cross these two, what will be the result? $50-50. Hoekom? Want 50% van elkeen van ons gene kom van ons paas af en 50% van ons maas af. Dis 'n gegewe. So it works like that. Now, the challenge is, what will happen when we bring a green baby in and we mate this green baby with this half white, half red jelly baby? Can you see what's starting to do? What can you observe here is that all three, this offspring, have 50% green, né? Because 50% are coming from that one. The 50% that comes from this baby, you cannot determine, because by chance there's more or less of the red that's been transmitted to an individual, but there is a lot of variation that's been created here. Wie het al kruisdeling gedoen? Wie van julle het al kruisdeling gedoen? The first generation. I guarantee you all were very happy about the first generation. Why? Because it's 50-50. But then when you take that F1 and you cross it again, then everything's become teer mekaar. Why? Because of that. As ek nou nog aangaan en ek sit nog 'n oranje babytjie by, kyk wat gaan begin hier gebeur. So jy gaan hier onder diere kry. Hierdie eerste kan ek sê die eerste babytjie hier heel onder. Hy's 50% oranje, want 50% kom daarvan af. Maar hy is net 20% verwant aan die groenetjie, 20% verwant aan die wittetjie en net 10% verwant aan die rooie. When we look at that baby's brother or sister, on this side. I don't know, we didn't determine the sex as yet, but if you look at this one, it's also 50% orange, but this one is 35% green, 15% red, and 0% related to the white one. That means that this one is unrelated to that animal. So there was a question about line breeding. So with line breeding, when you do not do very good record keeping and selection, then you can do line breeding. You can breed this bull down here, and you can say this is bred from that bull. But there's no guarantee that this one is actually still mainly related to those animals. So in blub, we always make a expectation. Né? So the expectation is, and that is true, on average, it will work like this. On average, you are always 50% related to your parents. You are on average related 25% to your grandparents and 12.5% to your great-great-parents. That's average. The problem is, what we said is, that is not always true. I just show you. It could be that I am unrelated to one of my grandparents, genetically. So what will happen, for instance, if you take a bull, the bull is very high on your milk breeding value, for instance, and you take a cow, which is low on milk breeding value, and you mate it together. Then the next generation will be between the two. So it's corrective mating. Né? So you do a corrective mating, and you will be very happy with this one. It will be maybe 110 breeding value for milk, if this one was 130 and this one was 85. But then when you continue breeding with these offspring, what can happen is that you can breed from this off two generations on, where this individual is still highly correlated to the good parent. So this one's milk breeding value will still be very good, but then just the next time, what can happen is that none or little of that good genes are transmitted, but only the bad ones. And that is why when you select a bull, go and do your homework, go into the pedigree lines, and go and look for corrective matings. We must do corrective matings. We need to do corrective matings to improve our cow herd, but never use a bull that is a product from a corrective mating. Because this is the risk that you are faced with when you are using a bull that is a product from a corrective mating. So how will we know what genes did we inherit from which parents? We can do it only by two ways. We can do it in performance testing, in progeny testing. It was done very successfully through the years. But then now we are in a position to use genomics to do that. So genomics is just a lot of markers on the genome of the animal, and that identify the animal's genetic makeup. So when a calf is being genotyped, the father and the mother is being genotyped, and all four grandparents are being genotyped, then we can say exactly what is the genetic relationship between the calf and each of the parents and the grandparents. And then we will know for instance, from a corrective mating, we can know this individual, which one is that, and then we can breed with the one that receives or is more related to the good parent rather than the one that's not so good. Genomic breeding values, everyone is talking about it. Yapi, we have now seven beef breeds and 3 dairy breeds and 1 sheep breed that we estimate genomic breeding values for. And there's a lot of companies out there that sell genomics according to scientific procedures on a wrong platform. That cannot work. So how do you make use of genomics? You test your animal, and that genomics profile is being incorporated within your pedigrees. Remember, we always thought that this individual is 25% related on the grandparents. I just show you it is not always true. So the only way that we can correct for that is by the genomic testing, so that we can know exactly how related is one animal with another animal. And then we use the genomics within the pedigree information, and we incorporate that into performance data. You need to use your genomic profile within your performance data on your farm, so that you know how must this profile look like if the animal perform good or not so good. You need to do that. You cannot take a genomic profile, send it off to America, get back a breeding value. You don't need to do parentage. You don't need to know who's the bull. You don't need to know. You don't need to do performance testing anymore. You just pluck hairs, send it away, you get answers back. That answer is correct. If you were farming, for instance, if you do it in the States, if you were farming there, because that is based on that population. And it's not the same as in your population here in South Africa. So genomic information, I'm almost done. For genomic information, you need to define animals. You define the animal's genetic code, and that you can use to identify also the animal. Even after slaughter, you can take a piece of the meat, we can genotype it, and we can be for sure from which animal is that meat come from, if that animal was genotyped. Then we can do, with the genomics, we do parentage verification as well as parent discovery. So if all your bulls are being genotyped in your herd, then you can do multiple sire, and that calves, when you genotype the calves, then we can go onto the database, and we can with very high success rate identify which bull's offspring is that. So we can discover parentage, which you cannot do on the microsats, the DNA that we use today. And then we have also developed breed relativeness. So I can take a hair sample, and I can tell what breed is this related to. Of course, I cannot do it with the Pinzgauers on the moment, because you didn't genotype as yet. So But in the future, I strongly believe that we will get to that point as well. And then there's a lot of single mutations. Now, single mutations is a trait like all of you have heard about double muscling. I think that is everywhere in the field. Double muscling is a single trait gene. What that means is that it's only the double muscling is because of one single gene that does not been affected by the environment. So you will have a double muscled calf even if you are farming in the Karoo or you're farming in the Western Cape where you have green grass all year around. And so there is markers on this for coat color, Kalpain and Kalpastain for meat quality traits, Pompey's diseases, myostatin is double muscling, baldness, we can see, remember baldness, Punas is 'n dominante geen, so jy kan 'n bil hê wat Puna is, maar hy kan nog steeds 'n horing geen dra. En dan kan hy na sy nageslag toe of die Puna geen oordra of die horing geen. So jy kan 'n Puna bil op 'n veiling koop en dan gebruik jy dit in jou kudde en daar kom horings en Punas uit. Dis wat gaan gebeur. Maar as jy hom toets, dan en daai bil is homozygoties Puna, met ander woorde, al twee die gene wat van die pa en die ma afkom, is al twee Puna. Hy gaan net vir jou Puna kalver steel. Maar en as jy dit nou op 'n horingkoei gebruik het, dan gaan daai kinders almal Puna wees, maar hulle gaan weer dan kan Punas en horing steel. So dis belangrik, so we can quantify it also with this.
The Pinzgauer is very distinct in terms of the color pattern. So do you have that on your panel as well?
So we have a lot of coat color markers. So
The Pinzgauer ones.
I'm not 100% sure because they use all of that markers. Hulle gebruik al daai markers vir kleur. Gebruik jy in kombinasie om te bepaal wat die uitkoms gaan wees. En dan het ek gesê jy kan die rasfraksies gaan beraam, né? So hierdie is baie interessant. So wat hier op hierdie prentjie is nou net baie klein. Julle sal sien hier's 'n klomp kolletjies. Ek dink hier's oor die 9000 kolletjies op hierdie grafiek. En elke kolletjie is 'n dier se genomiese profiel. En dan het ek gegaan en ek het die ras verskillende kleure gemaak. So die verskillende kleure wat u hier sien is verskillende rasse. Wat sê die ding vir ons? Hy sê vir ons hoe ver is 'n individu se genomiese samestelling anders as 'n ander dier sin. En jy kan sien hoe klaster die rasse saam, né? So jy kan presies gaan uitwerk wat sê my hier's byvoorbeeld hier's die jerseys, maar daar lê 'n jerseytjie uit daar. So daar is bietjie ander bloed of iets wat dalk daar ingekom het. Jy sal sien hierdie is oranje wat hier lê. Dis die Afrikaners. En die rooi is Bonsmaras, en jy sal sien, is baie moeilik vir julle om te sien, maar hierdie kolletjie hieronder is ook rooi. Hoekom is dit rooi? Want die Afrikaners het so 'n paar jaar terug 'n infusieprogram gehad, om sekere kenmerke sterker terug te bring in die Afrikaner. En hulle het Bonsmara diere gebruik daarvoor. En daai diere is die halfkruise. Met ander woorde, daai diere is uit 'n Bonsmara pa en uit 'n Afrikaner koei geteel. En so kan jy dit perfek sien hoe hy skuif. So in opgraderingsprosesse, wanneer jy sê maar opgradeer, jy kom in met basiskoeie en jy kan met genomika help, dan kan dit moontlik wees om een koei of een dier wat inbring wat reeds suiwer is, te klassifiseer en daai dier is al reeds suiwer, terwyl jy 'n ander een inbring, maar dit gaan jou 2 of 3 generasies vat nog om daardie lyn suiwer te kry, want hulle het verskillende genetiese make-ups. Ja, en dan sluit ek af met die katalogus. Ek gaan nie baie sê hier, sorry.
Pinzgauer genomiese toetse is daar in Suid-Afrika.
In Suid-Afrika het ons nog nie Pinzgauers gedoen nie.
Nee, dit is iets wat
6. Ja. Asser het 6 getoets, ja.
Nee, is te min.
Nee, is te min, dis te min.
ja, dis die gedagte, jy het 150 diere ten minste nodig, nee?
Vir hierdie raste.
Ja, om 'n verwysingspopulasie te dis is 'n belangrike ding om mee te begin, ja.
Net om die ras breedkies te doen.
Ja.
Net vir dit.
So dit is iets wat ons, as ons boere daaroor praat, is iets daarin wat ons ernstig wil na kyk, want nou kan 'n ou gaan, die verwysingspopulasie kan jy sien, jy weet 'n dier wat daar buite rondloop, is hy verwant of is hy nie verwant? Waar lê hy?
Miskien net vinnig nog die ander ras, as iemand wat nou jare daai ras se wille gebruik het en hy besluit hy wil nou stoetdeel, het hulle 'n vergunning dat hy 'n generasie kan spring as hy sy koeie genomies toets.
En die genomies lê binne in daai.
En as dit binne in daai ras se kluster lê,
Ja.
binne in 'n kluster lê, dan hoef daai diere nie byvoorbeeld as basisdiere in te kom nie.
Ja.
Dan kom hulle as aas in of enige wat.
Ons wil graag dieselfde pad
Ja.
eintlik stap om as gevolg van die sommer om het vooruit en die hele ding rondom die effektiewe populasie. Om dit te weet.
Ek gaan net vinnig raak aan ons nuwe katalogusse. Ek is seker u almal het dit al gesien. Jy kan 'n prentjie van jou dier daar opsit, jy kan hom regtig mooi maak en alles. So I just want to quickly have few comments on our on our catalogs. So I've talked about the cow value and how the cow value is constructed. So the cow value is made of calving ease, calf growth, milk, maintenance, and fertility. And these 5 building blocks bow up to the cow value, and you can see here what is the different building blocks and how it goes up there. So the calving ease, as I said, we use birth, direct and maternal. For calf growth, we use weaning direct. Milk, we use weaning maternal. For maintenance, we use mature weight and 10% of the wean maternal. And then for fertility, we use heifer fertility, calf fertility, and longevity within a selection index. And these 5 are making the cow value index. And then we also have 3 other values. The one is the growth value. The growth value, and the growth value is coming from the ADG, breeding value for the animals, as also where there is breeds with feed conversion ratio that have been tested. We also incorporate that. But if a breed does not do a lot of feed intake tests, then we use mainly the ADG part. Then we have a carcass value, and this carcass value is being made up by the ultrasound measurements that we do for eye muscle area, fat, thickness, and marbling. We calculate also a breeding value for the end weight of the animal at the end of that feed intake test, and that are being incorporated within a carcass value. And then the production value is then just a combination where we put in the cow value and the growth value to give that one. Just to come quickly back to the cow value, there's 4 animals there. What is their cow values? Which one is the better one on cow value? Naskies? So kan jy sien hè, die koeiwaarde is dieselfde. Dis ding van 'n saamgestelde indeks. Die indeks kan 128 wees vir al 4 daai bulle. Maar nou kan jy na die boublokke gaan kyk. Want sekere diere is net so winsgewend op jou plaas as 'n ander dier, maar vir verskillende redes. Dis baie belangrik. En so byvoorbeeld, as jy gaan kyk, die heel linkerkantste koei het 'n onderhoudswaarde van 74. Wat bedoel dit? Dis 'n groot koei, of dit gaan groot koeie wees. As jy nie die regte veld het vir hulle nie, gaan jy nie kan onderhou nie, hulle gaan nie die bus uitval en hulle gaan nie presteer soos jy gedink het nie. So jy gaan nie hierdie dier vat vir ekstensiewe veld, byvoorbeeld, kom ons sê die Karoo of iets nie, nee. Maar dan kan jy sien, hierdie 2310 se kalfgemaakwaarde is 85. So dit sê, daai koei gaan groot kalvers gee, en die kans dat hulle bietjie gaan vassit is ook hoog. Maar nou kyk, so jy moet net daarop let, maar dan omdat daai kalf alreeds groot is, moet die kalfgroei moet dan ook hoog wees, want hulle is almal hou verband met mekaar. En die probleem is, as jy daar so 'n 85 het, né, en by jou kalfgroei of so, het jy ook 'n 85, dan is dit moeilikheid. Dan ook, hier's 'n kleiner dier. Jy kan sien, hier is nou 'n kleiner dier as jy ekstensief is, maar hier is 'n 75 vir vrugbaarheid. So wanneer daai vrugbaarheidssyfers enige plek uit is, dan wil 'n ou dit eintlik vermy, want vrugbaarheid bly jou beste of jou mees belangrike eienskap om voor te selekteer. So hier kan jy gaan kyk, hoekom is dit, en die regte dier kies vir jou omgewing, sodat jy nie die omgewing hoef te verander om jou dier in stand te hou nie.
Net dat van daarna toe, hulle sal effektief seker sê dat 2310, as sy kalfgemaak 85 is, maar sy het 'n baie goeie vrugbaarheid in haar nageslag, en dan sê dit dat sy kalf is, maar net dat en as 'n ou dan kyk na die kalfgroei, die melkwaarde, die onderhoudswaarde is nie so sleg nie, maar as 'n mens nou sou kies, dan alhoewel die kalf gemaak laer is, die feit dat sy goeie vrugbaarheid het.
Maar kyk gou, hoe kan ek hierdie ding opsom, né? Hierdie koei gaan 'n groot kalf gee, wat die bul se dogters, ja. Die bul se dogters, wanneer hulle begin kalf, daai dogters gaan groot kalvers gee, wat baie goed groei, wat genoeg melk het, wat se onderhoud hoër is, dit is hoër is, né? Dis hoër, met ander woorde, dis groter koeie. Met ander woorde, jy kry 'n groter kalf uit 'n groter koei uit. Dit maak
stel is dat daar nie 'n kalfprobleem moontlik kan.
Presies.
As jy nou vergelyk met
Kom ons vat, daai en is 115, né? Hierdie ene het 'n groot probleem. Nee, dis kalfgemaak is goed, sorry. Ja, sou hierdie een ook sleg gewees het, né? Ja, soos nee, daai is ook 'n baie groot koei. Maar hierdie is 'n klein koetjie. So as dit 'n klein koetjie is en sy het 'n 85 gehad, dan pas dit nie by mekaar nie.
Ek dink net, ek sou, as hierdie 4 bulle was, wat ek het, ek sal nie sommer my verse ook maak, by nommer 10, by die 10. Ja. Sien julle? Ek sal nie sommer my verse ook maak. Ek sal op my senior koeie. wat hy gaan. Maar as jy net nommer 15 kyk, dis 'n groot toei. Of hy gaan groot dokters gee, maar kyk hulle kalk gemaak is goed. So dis nie 'n slegte, dis ook 'n groot toei en die preparaat is ook baie goed. So dis maar ons is vir kos, en jy sal makliker nommer 15 gebruik om persoon te maak as wat jy nommer 10 gebruik om persoon.
Because that cow value, you calculate it on the pie with the percentage of each value.
Yeah.
Then make it the same, those cows, because of that pie percentage.
Yeah, so remember these 5 blocks have different weights because we assign the weights based on the economical value of this different traits and the genetic variance and the heritability. And then these, so you cannot just add these up and divide it by 5. It doesn't work like that. Although all 4 of these have the same cow value, they are there because of different reasons. And as Dr. Japie said, if you look for a specific bull, there's 4 bulls that will be, all 4 of them will be efficient in terms of the rands per hectare, but for different reasons, and you can go and select the bull for the purpose that you want to use it. Dan die laaste skyfie, Dr. Japie, het ek maar gou, hierdie is 'n SA beef bulls. So op die katalogus sal julle sien, daar is altyd so 'n QR kode. Jy kan jou foon of jou tablet vat, then just scan in that QR code. It will take you to sabeefbulls.com, or jy kan op die webwerf gaan, on the web, you can go to the web, go to www.sabeefbulls.com, and there you can find all the information of the animal. If you have photos of your animals, please upload it into Logix. If you go into Logix to the animal information screen, there's a place for photo, and you can do it yourself. You can upload your pictures itself. It will show on SA Beef Bulls with all the genetic values, the star ratings, and then also the pedigree tree, and you can also go back till 10 generations in the pedigree up, and then this bull is also being genomically tested, and there is all the single genes mutations, the single traits, the double muscling, polled genes, everything there for you to see. Goed, en dan net my boodskap vir vandag is seleksie mag nooit op 'n enkel kenmerk berus nie. Selekteer altyd volgens 'n goed opgestelde teeldoelwit of maak gebruik van 'n saamgestelde waarde soos die koeiwaarde, die groeiwaarde, die karkas of produksiewaardes. Selekteer altyd die genetika wat reeds aangepas is in jou omgewing waarbinne hulle moet presteer. Moet nooit die omgewing gaan aanpas om jou dier te ondersteun nie. Die genetika moet aanpas by die omgewing waarin hy moet presteer. Dan elke teeler se voorkeure en afkeure gaan verskil. Hoekom? Dit verskil hoofsaaklik as gevolg van verskillende produksiestelsels en omgewings waarbinne die dier. Jou omgewing op jou plaas is mos nie dieselfde as 'n ander boersin wat 200-300 kilos weg van jou bly nie. So dit is dit, en dan kies altyd 'n teeldier met aanvaarde genetiese merites. Dink baie mooi voordat jy 'n bul gaan koop sonder produksiesyfers. Dit is baie belangrik. En dan kies altyd 'n teeldier wat ook funksioneel en visueel korrek is. Al het hy die beste syfers op papier en daai dier is nie visueel of funksioneel nie, korrek nie, dan help dit niks as 'n teeldier. Die ander kant is ook waar. Al is daai dier die perfekte dier in terme van die visueel en hy's funksioneel 100% korrek, maar hy teel nie soos wat hy is nie, dan help hy ook niks. Hy's 'n mooi skoudier, maar hy gaan jou nie help om mee te teel vir die toekoms nie. So daar is bulle waar jy kan gaan selekteer wat winsgewende kalvers op jou plaas kan teel, en dan baie belangrik, stud bulls are always the best choice, because they are inspected by the breed society, and a lot of defects are already been taken out, and breed standards are in place, so you can buy met 'n oop gemoed kan jy daai dier aankoop. Want die genootskap het klaar die sterretjie op hom gesit. And then, second to that, look at the breeding values as an additional tool to make your final decision. Then, to finish, BLAP or breeding values and visual appraisal is not 50-50. It's 100 and 100%. If the one is 100% and the other one is not 100%, that is not the bull that you want as a parent for your next offspring. And with that, I thank you for your time. I think ek het bietjie te baie lank gepraat, maar ek hoop dit maak sin.
Ons vraag gou vir Jacob net die aantekeninge van al hierdie inligting. En as ons dan hier klaar is,